Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the show, another kind of special off the beaten path show with my co-hosts, Jack Toledano and Craig Sybert. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you all this evening?
Amazing. Thank you.
Very good. Better day than yesterday, as Rodney Dangerfield would say. Yesterday wasn't so good. Today's better.
There you go. There you go. Well, it's almost Friday. That's a good thing. This week is just kind of flown by. And we've got a pretty interesting topic here today for everybody. So one of our viewers, I don't remember which one, came up with this idea. It said, Pete, how about some of you guys or any of you do a show talking about albums that help pick you up when you're down? Those pick-me-up albums, those albums that just really make you feel good. When you're feeling sour, you listen to these albums and it just brightens your mood. And so I brought it up to Jack and Craig, and initially everybody was kind of like, well, usually songs kind of fill that hole, right? And then I was like, well, yeah, but why don't we try and make this a little more difficult and do albums? And I guess I'm an album guy, so I figure, all right, let me give these guys a real challenge here. Because I mean, it probably would have been easy for me to pick songs, but I wanted it to be a little more challenging. So I asked everybody to pick 5 albums, any genre, that when they're feeling blue, these albums help make them feel pretty good. All right, help brighten the spirit. Pick me up albums, I guess we're going to call this. So Craig, I'm going to have you go first, then Jack, then myself, and we'll keep going around till we get all our 5 in.
Sure. I same with me. It was a challenge. I mean, again, I'm really a song-based guy, and I spent a lot of time listening to albums when I was younger, but lately I didn't get a chance to really listen to those. But as soon as, like you said, I started listening to it or thinking about it, a couple of them just started hitting me. And I don't think I took it as necessarily just enlighten me every time. Like if I'm down, it brings me up. It's more, it gets me in a mood. It puts me a little bit above where I am before. So I don't even necessarily have to be down for some of these to kind of get me excited. And that's why I'm starting with that, is because the first one on my list is actually Injustice for All by Metallica, where it's not necessarily, I don't have to be down for that one to get me up and excited and a lot happier and kind of wanting to move and do things. But that album itself is just, it's one hit right after another. It's one moving song right after another. It's one word, songs that have amazing words right after another. And it's it's obviously it's a metal album. It makes you want to get up and move. So I would say that I could definitely put that on, headphones on, in the room, whatever I'm doing, it's going to bring me up and get me moving at that point. So
there you go. There you go.
Very
cool. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have all come up with. So Craig got us right off on the heavy metal front. So Jack, what do you got for your first choice?
Okay, so I don't have too many metal albums in my immediate list. So this one may come as a little bit of a surprise to you, Pete. And this is going to be a little bit of a recurring theme for me, because I live up in the Northeast, and my family has moved down south, and I get depressed and lonely without them sometimes. So especially during the holidays, because I have family in Florida, I have family in North Carolina, and they so I don't see them at Thanksgiving normally, don't see them at Christmas, but this one Christmas album really picks me up every year, the Jethro Tull Christmas album.
interesting. Wow.
Yeah. You know what? It is a very cheerful album. The second song, it's like a medley of all Christmas themes. Holly Herald, it's called. It's just so gosh darn cheerful. I love it. Last Man at the Party, First Snow on Brooklyn. Doesn't get any better than that. Pretty much anything he did on that album, meaning Ian Anderson.
And you could pretty much listen to that album any time of year. It's not just to listen to around the holidays in the winter, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah. Right.
That's a good choice. All right, so we got 2 that I did not expect here. That's pretty good. So interestingly enough for me, I don't have any metal on my list here. I have a couple that are in my honorable mentions, but yeah. And I really sat down and said, all right, I know there's a lot of metal albums that I love to put on when I want to just get into that kind of mood. But I took a different approach with this. I said, how about albums that just really pick me up either from a nostalgia reason, or there's just some songs on these albums that are just like, I hear them and I go like, oh man, that's so great, right? So I kind of took that approach, sort of. And my number 5 is I'm gonna pull a mulligan here today. I do it all the time, and I had one of these as my number 5, and then I was like, oh, but what about that album? And then I was like, well, I could list that one in my honorable mentions. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, there's no way I can't not put this on this list. And I'm like, well, I could take the other one off, and I couldn't do that one either. So I said, all right, screw it. They're both going to come in number 5 for me. So one of them is Kansas Song for America.
Ooh,
okay.
And again, these may not necessarily be my favorite albums from these bands. And in fact, most of them aren't. But there's something about these albums that just like kind of always when I hear them, and certainly certain songs really lift me up. I mean, this one has the title track, Lonely Street is just a gorgeous song. I hear it, man, I just kind of, get into it. It's got, Lamplight Symphony and Incomodro Hymn to the Atman, great uplifting, powerful prog rock tunes. It's got Down the Road and The Devil Game, which are two kind of like bluesy rockers. This album to me is just such a feel-good album. And the one that's going to tie with it is the one at the last minute I said, there's no way I can't put this album on here. And that is The Captain and Me by the Doobie Brothers.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, scared me. I thought you were going to say Captain and Tennille.
No, not quite. No, not quite. Right. This is just an absolute magical album for me. It's my favorite Doobie Brothers album, and it's so many songs that just kind of like brighten my spirit whenever I hear them. I mean, Natural Thing, Long Train Running, China Grove. I mean, those are classic songs.
Yeah.
Dark Eyed Cajun Woman, Clear as the Driven Snow. It's just got this acoustic thing going on there. And then you got Without Me, which is a heavy rocker. Southside Midnight Ladies, just this great sing-along tune. Evil Woman is heavy. I mean, the title track, Ukaya. I mean, it's just an amazing album that I listened to it right before we went on the air. And I'm just sitting there, and it brought a smile to my face. I'm like, yeah, just love this album. And this is an album, probably even more so than this one. This is an album I could put on if I am feeling like total crap. I'm pissed about something. I had a terrible day. I know I could put this album on, and it will definitely help brighten my spirit. So to me, that kind of, I had to go by that criteria. So that's my double shot for number 5, my first pick there.
Very nice.
Back to Craig.
And I'll echo that idea that the first album I picked was one that was bottom of my list. It was kind of weeding out the things that are okay. And, Metallica definitely is not necessarily a I'm down, bring me up, but it certainly brings me to that higher level. But this album that I'm going to mention here is definitely one of those albums that kind of what you were just saying about the Doobie Brothers. It is, if I'm down, if I am completely at the bottom, this album will bring me up. And it's the Weathered album by Creed. I actually listened to, I was kind of thinking it was going to be Human Clay. I haven't listened to the actual albums front to back in a while. And since we talked about this, I kind of put them on. And I listened to Human Clay and I was like, there's some good songs on it. It's okay. But Weathered has a lot of those uplifting songs that just take it and give me goosebumps. And, there's no way I can think any bad thoughts when I'm listening to the Weathered album. Every single song on it is either really hard, really uplifting and shining. And even all the way to the end, there's that little song at the end called Lullaby, where it's just acoustic and him singing. And it's such a beautiful song, such a beautiful uplifting feeling towards that album. So that's, like I said, I've been kind of working my way up, but I wanted to jump that one in there with matching with what you said on yours.
Yeah, a lot of big choruses and a lot of great melodies and stuff. As you're talking about that, I was thinking, because I like Alter Bridge even more than Creed. Yeah. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's like, wow, I probably could have put an Alter Bridge album on my list. Because I those totally are like feel good.
Yeah.
Happy, joy type of things, right? Those
exactly.
Albums, yeah. Cool choice. All right, Jack, what do you got next?
All right. Okay. So this mine are not in any particular order. I'm just
mine aren't really either. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So my second one is probably my only true metal album. It's by a Swedish band called Hammerfall. So again, recurring theme, family. I was having some Family Problems in like 1998, 1999. This album had just probably came out only about a year, and it was the first one that I bought, and I immediately fell in love with this band. To me, they are like, in metal speak, they to me are like the most positive metal band. You know, it just seems like every song that they put out there, it's like a song of hope and, you know, positivity. You know, so the album is their second one, Legacy of Kings. You know, with songs like Stronger Than All, Let the Hammer Fall, At the End of the Rainbow, Remember Yesterday, which is a ballad, but a beautiful ballad. And, you know, like you said, Craig, a lot of really good choruses, but you would have to check it out. And I think you'd understand, but.
Hammerfall are definitely a happy metal band.
Yes.
That's why I always call bands like Hammerfall like happy power metal. It's like, you know, grab your drink and just like, you know, hearts on fire. Yay. It's all these sing-along choruses and just upbeat stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely happy music, right?
And I remember, you know, going back to our last theme about driving in the car, I was having a really rough day, and I went out in the car and I popped the CD in, and I'm like, wow, these guys are amazing. And, you know, really picked me up.
That's what it's all about, right?
Yep.
That's all about. All right. My next choice, Jack has already mentioned this band. I'm going to go with Jethro Tull, Songs from the Wood.
All right.
Great album. Again, not my favorite Jethro Tull album, but one of the albums from them that and it's funny because this got on my list because the other day I'm thinking about which albums I'm going to pick for this. And I happened to be singing the title track. And then I happened to be singing Jack and the Green, and then, you know, Hunting Girl. And before you know it, I'm like, oh, these are all just such memorable, like kind of feel good, upbeat, kind of folky rock tunes, you know, and it's just like
Cup of Wonder.
A Couple Wonder is absolutely great. You know, Fire at Midnight is a really cool song. And as I said to myself, I really need to put a Jethro Tull album on this list here. But I'm not going to choose like one of my absolute favorites because I like some of my favorite albums by them for other reasons. But I think this to me is really easy listening Jethro Tull, although the music is very challenging. But it's just got these great melodies and the instrumentation is great. I love his vocals on it. And it's just like, it's happy music to me. And that's kind of what's all about. So I know if I put on Songs from the Wood, I am no longer down in the dumps. I am totally getting into it, singing along, and that's what it's all about. So back to Craig.
So we're talking about sentimental. This one sticks pretty hard in the sentimental area. About the time this album came out, or shortly after it came out, my son had just been born, the album came out a couple of years before he was born, but I kind of latched onto it after he was born. We moved from Florida to Maryland. I was going through a lot of dealing with a new job, new position, new people I'm working with and stuff. And I'd started kind of searching out music that wasn't my normal music. I wanted to start spreading out. And I got onto the album, The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. And I kind of akin to those story albums anyways, where they kind of tell the story through the songs and kind of move you through different feelings of the person in it, and you'll see that as a theme in mine as well. But that song or that album really kind of just hit me at that time. And now anytime I get into that funk or get into that low, you know, area where I need to get out, and some other albums won't do it, I'll put that album on and just listen to it and let it run from front to back. A lot of times I'll actually listen to that album 2 or 3 times back to back, just because I love all the songs and how they fit together on that album. But that was a pretty good solution to my issues at that time, and helped brought me to back to normal after those times.
You bring up an interesting point about like a concept album, because a concept album, in most cases, you're going to want to listen to and immerse yourself into what's going on with the story and everything else.
Yep.
And what does that do? It shuts everything else up.
Makes my mind think about that, makes my mind follow the story instead of that. And that's exactly, again, you'll see that in actually, well, one of my other ones and one of my honorable mentions is the same story. So yeah, same idea. That's exactly what it was. It was thinking something else and getting my mind off what was going on. So
yeah, like for me, I could think of like maybe Queensryche's Operation Mindcrime, or The Who by Tommy, or Genesis Selling England by the Pound, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
That's pretty cool. That's a good choice. All right, Zach, back to you.
Okay, so this next one, and Pete's very familiar with this band. We did a top 10 of them some time ago, back before COVID, Kiss. So now back in the 70s, I was a huge Kiss fan, and I caught a lot of abuse in middle school. Of course, about the time I started to like them, people were no longer liking them, and they jumped in the bandwagon, oh, Kiss sucks, and yada, yada. But every time I'd go home, I'd put this record on. It would renew my faith in them as a great band. Rock and Roll Over. That was the first album I ever bought by them. You know, I Want You, Ladies Room, Take Me, all great songs. The Doctor of Love. So for me at that time, it just did not get any better. That opening riff to Ladies Room, I thought was outstanding.
Yeah, definitely a lot of upbeat, happy songs on that album. Unlike, say, like
Agreed.
Their first 3 albums. I mean, Dress to Kill's got some mostly upbeat stuff on it, but
right, yeah.
Even Destroyer has some more kind of moody things on it. But I think Rock and Roll is pretty. Yeah, that's an interesting choice. All right. Well, I knew I had to put Yes on this list, because there's so many Yes songs.
Just his voice is like,
yeah,
uplifting.
I mean, how can you not listen to John Anderson and just like kind of like, oh, take me away, right?
Exactly.
So I said I had a couple that I was considering, and again, this is not my favorite Yes album, but it has some of my favorite songs that make me really feel good, and I wound up going with Going for the One. It has Awaken on it, which Awaken is probably my number one feel good Yes song. It has the title track, Going for the One, which is, a little tempo rock and boogie from Yes, which is a little unusual. It's got Turn of the Century, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's got Parallels, which is a good rocker. It's got Wondrous Stories, which is another really uplifting melodic song. And then, of course, I mentioned Awaken, which is the big long song at the end. And I just think this album is like, it's one of those albums that just kind of sweeps you away. Like I said, I like other Yes albums a little better than this one. But if I want to really get uplifted from the doldrums by Yes, and Yes is a great band to do that for me, this is probably the one I would reach for, because again, it's, I could have picked Close to the Edge, but that's so complex and epic. It's like, well, that, you really got to pay attention to. And I could have picked Relayer. I could have picked Fragile, but I said, the one for me that just kind of like, you can just literally close your eyes, forget everything else, and just let the album just kind of sweep you away. And that's this one. So Going for the One, my next choice.
Very nice. Okay, Craig.
All right, Craig.
Oh, back to me already? Jeez,
back to you already.
Are we sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll stick with it since we were talking about the story albums and the concept albums. Another one that, again, it's more escape, but this is just a lot darker than the My Chemical Romance. Well, not a lot darker, but this The Wall by Pink Floyd. And I kind of also have that akin to the movie. The movie is a really good escape as well. So listening to the actual album is really nice. They actually put a soundtrack album of The Wall out that's got a couple extra songs on it, and the songs kind of bleed into actually scenes from the movie that I prefer to listen to. But The Wall itself is definitely one of those albums that, if I know that I'm going to have something coming at me, or if I'm actually dealing with something, I'll put on The Wall and just kind of listen again to kind of escape, get that story idea in my head and kind of move away into that story.
And there's a familiarity, I think, for most of us, whether you love the Wall or not. There's a familiarity about that album that has that warm and fuzziness, right?
It does.
Because so many of those tracks were radio hits. And if you grew up with the album like I did, the album front to back, back to front, and it's just very familiar. And you bring the whole movie thing, and I remember I saw that in the theaters. That was one of the weirdest movie theater experiences of my life. And I remember walking out like, what the hell did we just watch, right?
Actually, Pete, I have a remembrance of that. Do you remember when we had the suite in Bevier?
Yeah.
Didn't they rent that movie one time? And
we did. Yeah, we did. I saw it in the theaters though in Middleton here, but then we did watch that in college. That's I could totally see you picking that.
I thought it was kind of dark, wasn't it? The movie.
It is.
It
And I
is.
think that's one of the connections I get to it. Even later on, I kind of, I read the stories of Sid Barrett and what he went through in that. And I know that that's what that album's about, is somebody struggling with those dark times keep creeping up on you and trying to keep those dark times out, and kind of connecting myself to that story as well. As one of the big things what I like about The Wall is, he kept fighting to get off addiction, or to get away from the addiction, or get away from the
Right.
music, or get away from the rock scene. And that whole struggle just kind of relates when you're starting to struggle with something. That's why I picked The Wall
Right.
for one of mine. So
Cool.
Maybe it was a metaphor for Sid Barrett's struggles way back when. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Jack, what do you got?
Okay, so this next one is going to be an interesting one. So back to the family theme. So back in summer of 2017, my brother Andrew and his family came up to visit us, and he had bought tickets to see this artist at Madison Square Garden. And then afterwards, he realized, oh, maybe I should invite my brother and his wife. So he asked me, and fortunately, we were able to get tickets close to him. So then I bought tickets for my daughter Samantha and her boyfriend and George, and we made it a full family function. It was just a great, that was a real pick me up in itself. And I'm talking about local artist Billy Joel. Yeah. And what an amazing freaking show. The album that I'm picking is probably his best, my favorite, 1977's The Stranger. And ironically, he played 5 songs that night. Moving Out, Only the Good Die Young, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, which is my favorite. Vienna, She's Always a Woman. Yeah.
That album is amazing. Yeah, as soon as you started telling that story, I'm like, oh, how did I forget Billy Joel on this list?
Yeah.
He's such a good storyteller, talking about escaping and into stories.
For me, like Billy Joel and Elton John is the epitome of what we're talking about here. And I'm really upset that I didn't include either one on this list, because both of those guys for me is the epitome of feel good music.
Yeah, and you don't have to like either one of them for the music to affect you that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I did listen to it today while I was working. So.
Well, I mean, that is a classic album. That's probably my favorite album by him as well. It's top to bottom. It's just absolutely amazing. It's a great story.
And the re-release of that album actually has 10 songs tucked in at the end of when he played Carnegie Hall on that tour.
Oh, some live stuff. Wow.
Yeah. And the funniest thing, I'm listening to this, and he's asking people nicely not to smoke in Carnegie Hall.
This is back in the 70s, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
With that.
Yeah.
That's a great pick. I wish I picked it. All right, my next one. So folks who know me know I like a bit of jazz, and I had picked a couple of jazz albums. We'll get to one of them in my honorable mentions, but I also had another band who are considered a rock band, but a rock band who plays a lot of jazz, and I love this band, and I think most of their music for me is feel good music, and definitely music to pull me out of any funk that I'm in whenever, no matter how bad it might be. And that's Steely Dan. And the album is Royal Scam. I almost went with Asia, but I think this happens to be, if it's not my favorite Steely Dan, it's my second favorite album. But again, it comes down to the songs that make up the album, right? I don't know about you guys, but anytime I hear Kid Charlemagne,
great
I'm tapping
song.
my foot and I'm snapping my fingers. Anytime I hear Don't Take Me Alive, I'm totally jacked. Anytime I hear The Fez, I'm singing and dancing. Anytime I hear Haitian Divorce, I'm into it. What else we got here? The title track on here, Caves of Altamira, Everything You Did, Green Earrings. I mean, it's just an amazingly fun, easy listening album that's just, to me, brings a smile to my face. And that's what it's all about. And I think I could have picked any Steely Dan album, any one of them. And I was like, well, I'm going to go with one of my favorites on this one. So there you have it.
That's cool. I'll have to go back and give that a re-listen.
The Royal Scam is so good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I go back to this like last time I went back to the recording and started jotting things down, because some of you guys, you'd mentioned a couple songs that I'd never even heard before, and I went back and listened to them, and wow, I think I get more new music out of this than I get
That's
than I
what it's
get
all
to
about,
reminisce
though,
about.
right?
Yeah, I like it. The last one on my list is kind of one of those, what you guys call them, where you swap out and they're kind of equal.
Mulligan, you're gonna pull a
Mulligan, yes. So
Mulligan.
Led Zeppelin 4 is definitely one of those songs that is just really upbeat. Like it, but it kind of also still goes back to that story idea. A lot of those songs on there, Battle of Evermore and Stairway to Heaven, is kind of like a journey. So again, it kind of takes me away, removes me from that thing I'm dealing with. And the mulligan that goes with it is more the extremely happy. And it kind of goes back to what Jack said about his first album. And it's actually the Burl Ives Christmas album. The Burl Ives Christmas album is one of those albums that I can listen to it, and every single time I hear it, I'm just taken back to sitting on the couch, watching those old Rudolph and Christmas movies, and seeing the image of him as the snowman singing, and you can't be unhappy when those songs are on. Holly Jolly Christmas just makes me smile every single time I hear it. But July 5th, I hear it, it's going to make me smile. So
I will say, Craig, Burl Ives has been a part of every Christmas of mine since probably I was old enough to have a set of ears. So probably when I was born, they were playing that at my first Christmas. You can't, in my household, no matter who I'm living with, where I'm at, Burl Ives has got to be played, that whole album, at least once during the Christmas.
Same here. My wife hates it. She hates it with a
How
passion.
could you hate Burl Ives?
I have no idea how she hates Burl Ives, but she hates it with a passion. Every year it comes around, I put it on a couple weeks before, maybe even the day of, and she just rolls her eyes as soon as it starts playing.
It's funny. So Burl Ives and Billy Joel are like the only two that we mentioned that Sue and I agree on, actually.
Oh, how can anybody hate Burl Ives? Oh man, you need to work on that. I'm sure you have that.
I have. Every year.
Well, what are you gonna do, right?
Okay,
that's
so
great.
Back to me.
Great choices. Very good. All right, Jack, what's your final choice?
Okay, so you mentioned one, so I'm going to swap that out for one of my honorable mentions. You mentioned Songs from the Wood. So this is going to be a mulligan choice for me. So we already talked about Songs from the Wood. Instead, I'm going to go for Symphony X, the New Mythology Suites.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
I just love that whole story. It's just, I could spend a half an hour talking about it, but just the way those songs intermingle and, one into the other, and, tells the story of the lost city of Atlantis. But definitely people go check that album out. It's wonderful. Yeah. And for my mulligan, I've never given The Who enough love, being on the show. So I'm going to say Who's Next. Excellent album. I love Won't Get Fooled Again, but there is not a bad track on that album.
Not at all.
Bob O'Reilly, Bargain, even the third song, Love Ain't for Keeping. The song is over.
That's one of those albums, like, like if I were to walk into a room and walk into Jack's house and Jack is sitting there with a puss on his face, all down in the dumps, I would put Who's Next on. I'd go over to Jack and be like, snap out of it. The Who are on. Boom, there you go. Right.
And I would.
You absolutely would, right?
I'd require a beer too, but that's another story.
Of course. That's a good choice. Two good choices. Really good choices. All right. I'm going to conclude this here. I don't even think I need to say much about this. I'm just going to hold it up.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Again, with the voice too. I mean, whether music or not, you got his voice. As soon as he starts singing, you're smiling. You're there.
Yeah. And this is an example of one of those, probably for most people, completely overplayed album that for me, and I agree with it, still doesn't get old.
Yep.
I was just listening to it like an hour and a half ago, and I was like, man, this is like the ultimate warm and fuzzy album for me. It's like I've heard all these songs thousands of times. I know every one of them inside out, backwards, forwards, but it doesn't deny the enjoyment from it. And I know that if I'm, having a bad day, I can put this on and Peace of Mind, More Than a Feeling, Long Time, Rock and Roll Band, and I know I'm going to be like, yeah.
And looking at my list of
that
albums,
bad mood, man.
Yeah, no,
So Pete, if you had to pick one track off of that album as your, what would it be?
Peace of
you
Mind.
can't. You
Peace
can't.
of Mind. No, I can't. Peace of Mind.
Oh,
Okay.
I love
mine.
Peace of
Mine
Mind
is
is one of the
Smoking.
greatest feel-good songs of all time.
Mine is Smoking. I just love that.
Smoking's great. Yeah.
No, that organ solo he plays in the middle there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is really nice. Where he does
Yeah.
the slide down the organ.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really. But looking at my albums, I can look at my albums and see that most of the songs on these are songs that are gonna kind of get me up or not. But there's some albums that have like 2 or 3 songs that, I'll listen to them because I'm listening to the album. That album, there's no bad songs on that album.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
it's like the perfect album almost. Every song, even though they're not hits, like didn't make the charts or anything, all those songs are popular hits, keep you up, and they could have been number ones everywhere.
But that is one of those albums where I've heard every track on FM radio.
Absolutely. At
True.
one point or another, absolutely.
Yeah.
And arguably the greatest debut album in rock and roll history.
Yeah. I don't even know if I would argue.
And if it's not the number one, it's a top 3.
Mm.
I'll go to my grave saying that.
I would. There's your next show, by the way.
Mm.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely, because I did a show, God, 3-4 years ago where I talked about some of the top debut albums of all time, but I never did like the top 10 or whatever debut albums of all time, because that's different when you're just naming like 50 of them.
Yeah,
you can throw them all out there like, oh, these are all great, right? But if you really want to whittle it down, yeah, I mean, this has got to be one of them, right?
It's at least in the top 5. I mean, at the very least.
His debut, you got Jimi Hendrix's debut, you got Zeppelin's debut.
Yes, I was just going to say Zeppelin's debut. Yeah,
there's so many of them, right? And up until when we just talking about old stuff. I mean, even like in more recent years, you got some pretty strong stuff. So but I will forever proclaim this is, if it's not the greatest debut of all time, it's a top 3 for sure. So,
agreed.
Craig, you got any honorable mentions?
I do actually. So another one of those time frame things. When I was younger and we moved from Ohio to Florida, I latched onto an album, and there's a couple of hits off of it, but it's The Game by Queen.
Oh, okay.
That's got a lot of good upbeat and smiling and snappy songs. And, again, his voice kind of lends itself to be upbeat anyways, but it did get me out of that funk and moving down. Back to the Story albums, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, that album I could listen to the way those songs kind of flow into each other, and they're happy. You got a lot of harpsichord and different, sounding instruments in it. Quadrophenia by The Who.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, another one that it keeps flowing into each other. So it takes my mind off the things that are there. 2 more, Pet Sounds by Beach Boys.
That's on my honorable mentions too.
Yeah, I went through a really big phase of listening to the 50s surf music and pop music and stuff like that. And that was one of the ones that stuck out to me. It's also kind of a concept album as well. And the last one is, you mentioned Kiss, and I actually had an honorable mention Kiss on album, and it was during I probably would have been late high school, maybe even early college age, but Crazy Nights album was really such a party, upbeat, get me out of a funk album that had some, it had some weird songs on it, but like starting off with Crazy Nights and ending it with Turn on the Night. And those 2 songs are just so upbeat and happy and out there and in your face. So that was kind of my my last honorable mention there that relate back to Kiss.
Cool.
Very nice. Okay, so this one got dropped to the honorable mention, Songs from the Wood, as Pete mentioned. Another Jethro Tull album, Stand Up. I just think, it's what a beautiful transition from, they started out as a blues band, and they morphed into this band that played some jazz, played some folk, what else?
Hard rock.
Some hard rock, yeah. And it was just and still they retained a little bit of the blues, and it was just a great fusion. So it's anytime I really need to listen to some good music, I put that on. What else is there? Priest and Maiden, I gotta throw a few out there. So for Maiden is Power Slave, Number of the Beast For Priest, there's Painkiller, Stained Glass, British Steel, Unleashed in the East, Alice in Chains, Dirt, Beatles, Abbey Road, and Asia, the first album, as you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
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 So that's mine. I could mention more, but
Yeah, I had Abbey Road on my list as well, and that's probably I mean, I was never like a huge Beatles fan growing up. I've actually been discovering and starting to love the Beatles more later on in life, and Abbey Road is definitely a go-to album for me these days when I want, you know, some really uplifting music. So I mentioned jazz before, so I'm a big Miles Davis fan. But the album that I had in my honorable mentions is not one of his like typical jazz albums. It's Sketches of Spain from the late 50s. Absolutely hauntingly beautiful album. I mean, I dare anybody to put that on and not just like get swept away by its just kind of tranquil, haunting beauty. It's not your typical, you know, type of jazz album. It's not that at all. There's like a strings and orchestra, and his trumpet work is just, like I said, it's like off in the distance. Kind of, it's just really, really different. Just absolutely beautiful. It could, you know, it sounds like it could be like the soundtrack to like an Italian romance movie or something like that. Just absolutely gorgeous.
Awesome.
What else I got here? Genesis Duke. Not a common pick for me because I really love the early albums with Peter Gabriel and whatnot, but the Duke album is the last album they did, you know, moving into the 80s to kind of round out the 70s. There's just some great songs. I remember buying that, you know, from the record shop when it came out and just totally loving it. It's got a lot of really good upbeat songs. It's got Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again, Man of Our Times.
right.
Really good, catchy, like melodic, feel good stuff.
So here's a funny question for you, Pete. Would
That?
a certain former roommate of ours, would he have dug in deep into the Genesis catalog?
Probably. Yeah.
Really? You think so?
Probably.
Or was he just all about the danceable stuff?
Oh, you're talking about that roommate. Oh, because I was thinking about another one. Well, the one roommate, my old roommate, would have gone to the old stuff. The one you're talking about, who lived on his own, yeah, would have picked like the latter, you know, Phil Collinsy stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. White Snake Slide It In, I'm gonna throw on here. So here I have a couple heavy ones here. Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. Again, not a like overly happy album, but just a really good, supercharged, upbeat album from Sabbath. And that's like, if I want something a little, you know, because a lot of the Sabbath stuff is, you know, doomy and, you know,
dirge and dark, yeah,
that sort of thing. And I love it for that. But I think when I want some Sabbath that's a little more on the upbeat side, a little more kind of like that, just kind of gets you in a little better place, I go for Heaven and Hell, which is the first album, of course, with Ronnie James Dio on vocals. Blue Oyster Cult, Cultosaurus Erectus. Love that album. A lot of great memorable tunes. Just a lot of them just give me the warm and fuzzies. And my last one for this list is Uriah Heep's Abominog album. Again,
nice.
Their early 80s albums that just has a lot of really good, catchy, sing-along, memorable songs that are still pretty heavy, but really, really uplifting, great vocals, and just always one of my favorite Uriah Heep albums. Even though it's not my favorite album because I love the early 70s stuff, but this early 80s album by them really kind of does it for me when I'm in the mood to kind of be lifted out of that funk, so to speak. So there you have it.
All right, very nice.
So some interesting picks by all of us, I think. And this was a fun exercise, I thought, because this is kind of like a think outside the box sort of thing, right?
It strained my brain completely.
Yeah, well, because normally it's like, well, you know, pick your favorite songs, and last time we picked favorite driving songs. This is more like, I thought this was a good question or a good suggestion from our viewer, because I really had to think. It's like, well, if because I tried to like put myself. This is what I did. I do this all the time. So I put myself. I was like, all right, I'm pissed off. I'm down about something. I'm not in a good mood. And what I did was I walked over to this wall and I started looking around. And obviously there's a lot to look at here. And I started to say, all right, so if I'm feeling really low, what are some bands that I will automatically reach for? And these are a lot of the bands that I would reach for to get me out of that funk. And then I start saying, all right, well, in any normal day of the week, I would reach for this album, but no, this is not any normal day of the week. I'm in a really bad freaking mood today. And which album is the one that's going to pull me out of it? It's like, no, I'm not going to pick my favorite by them. I'm going to pick this one for the reasons that I gave. So I thought that this was cool because it just kind of like, it almost like it takes you out of your comfort zone, right? Because you have to put yourself in a different mindset. Because I'll be brutally honest, I'm not the type of guy who normally is in bad moods all the time. I try not to let stuff get to me, and it's very rare that I'm in a really foul mood about anything. But I know for me personally that when I am in one of those rare moods, music is the best thing to take me out of it.
Yep, agreed.
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm in a really bad mood. I usually reach for my metal albums, but
yeah. I mean, it depends for me. I don't know. Sometimes, like I said, it's like I think heavier stuff totally has its place for me.
right.
And that takes up most of my listening time. But sometimes, like if you notice, most of what's on my list is not really heavy music at all. But
Right.
sometimes I just, a bright melody, a tranquil instrumental passage, right? Or, this really uplifting keyboards and, whatever. So weird things sometimes will pull us out of that bad place in ways that like the really familiar stuff may not do, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of like the beans and cornbread type. Like it's a comfort thing for me. Like I go find the things if I'm feeling really bad or really upset about something, I'll grab something that I can sing to, that I know all the words to most of the songs to. Like that Creed album is that. I've heard that album. I was a huge Creed fan when they were really big. And I'll grab that because it's comfort. It's not only uplifting, but I know all the songs. And yeah, exactly. 100% right there.
Good points by everybody here. So this is a really fun show. So for all of you watching, list your comfort food albums, right? That's a great way to
Yes.
figure out how do I title this damn video.
There you go.
Albums, comfort food albums. I kind of like the comfort food albums. I don't know.
What are you gonna do as your cover photo? For when you put it up on YouTube.
I don't know. The three of us. I mean, that's
what's your comfort food? What is your go-to?
Oh, it's pizza, but
that's awesome.
You don't want a crock pot with some steam coming out.
Yeah, right. A crock pot of like macaroni and cheese or something like that.
Oh, there you go.
I don't know. I have no idea. Well, I have a couple hours till I post this, so figure it out. So for all of you who are watching, what we're talking about may not be how it's actually titled, but the important thing is watch the show and then list your favorite kind of pick-me-up albums. So what are the albums, the 5 albums, 10 albums, whatever you want to do, that when you're down deep in the doldrums, you put this album on or these albums on and it instantly lifts you up. I think that's the kind of what we're striving for here. So I want to thank Jack and Craig for joining me on this. A tough assignment today, but ultimately very fun and rewarding assignment. And make sure you visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. Of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Jack Toledano and Craig Sybert, I am Pete Pardo. See you guys all later on. We got the Monsters Den coming up right after this with Chris Allo and Rich Catino talking about some vampire films. So that's coming up next. So stay tuned and we'll see you all later on. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Peace out.